So there are so many wearables now in the market, whether it's smartwatch, whether it is fitness tracker or an activity tracker. There's a fitness watch, and I've been getting so many questions like, what is the difference? So today I will just give a little introduction on the differences between the smartwatch and activity tracker. So now let's start with the smartwatch. Now the smartwatch is basically one of these or one of these. It's somewhat like your smartphone. It can do almost everything your smartphone can do, just on the smaller scale. Now there are lots of different kinds of smartwatches with different kinds of softwares, but instead of getting too technical about this, let's start with the basic. There are Android Wear, which are mostly paired with Android phones. There are some smartwatches that have their own OS, which can be paired with either the iOS or Android-based OS, and of course there's the Apple Watch. Now, when it comes to smartwatches, what it does, it's more than just giving you notifications. Of course, the main reason that most people buy a smartwatch is because of the notifications. Now, it doesn't only notify you when you get calls, your messages or emails or whatnot, but you can actually do more than that. With certain smartwatches, such as the Samsung Gear S, you can even insert a SIM card and you can make phone calls with it, and you don't have to rely on your phone's Wi-Fi or 3G signal, or even its own Wi-Fi. Now, each smartwatch is different, and what it can do depends on its make and its model. Now, but basically, smartwatches, what it does, it gives you notifications, whether it is from your messages, from phone calls, from whatever apps you have, from emails and whatnot. Now, giving you notifications is not the only thing smartwatches can do. There are some brands that are very different. For example, like what Samsung did with their Gear S is actually allow you to put a SIM card in the watch itself. So you don't have to rely on your phone's internet connection to check your emails or even to listen to music. Now, you can also use Wi-Fi with the Gear S. So this is something different. A smartwatch is different from the usual ones. A lot of smartwatches these days, the ones that you see in the market, they are mostly Android Wear, which means they tend to be able to be paired with your Android phones. Now, most smartwatches nowadays tend to use Android Wear, and they tend to be paired, obviously, with Android. Now, with Android Wear, you can do lots of things like control your messages pings, or you can change your watch face, for example. Well, good news for Apple users, you can now use Android Wear as well. But of course, it's just very basic stuff, basic functions. So it's good for Apple users, so you don't have to stick with the Apple Watch. If you don't like it, maybe it doesn't suit your taste, or maybe you just think it's a bit too expensive. Now, speaking of iOS and Android support, there are some smartwatches that support both iOS and Android. Like for one is the Pebble Time, which is a very popular Kickstarter project. It supports both iOS and Android phones. Okay, now the thing about smartwatches compared with activity trackers is they tend to look more like proper watches. They can come whether with leather straps, fancy silver metal chain links, or even sport bands. And also, smartwatches tend to come with fancier screens. But because of the fancy screens, the thing is that it tends to drain battery faster. Most smartwatches can go maybe 1 to 2 days, 3 days maybe, and if it reaches a week, you're kind of pushing it already. Now, let's go to activity trackers. Now, activity trackers, I feel, have just way too much jargon in their names. There are fitness bands, activity bands and whatnot, so which is very, very confusing. So let's just put everything as activity tracker. Now, I feel there's two types. One that looks like a watch, which is how Fitbit did with its search, and there is the other one, which is the band looking ones, like how the Mi Band looks, or the Garmin Vivo Fit. Now, compared with a smartwatch, an activity tracker is much different. Just like its namesake, an activity tracker tracks activity. Duh. Now, so when activity trackers tracks your activity, it does it in different ways depending on the brand that you use. For example, the Fitbit Surge. Now, the Fitbit Surge looks like a watch. It has a heart rate monitor, and it can track many different kinds of activity, whether it's yoga, you were doing weights, whether you're running indoor, whether you're running outdoor, and it even has GPS tracking. Just like a lot of other activity trackers, GPS tracking tends to be very popular. So what it does is it actually tracks your route on where you're running, especially if you're running outdoor. Now, there are some activity trackers that look really simple. It's just a band that goes around your wrist, like the Mi Band and the Garmin Vivo Fit. They are both activity trackers in the shape of a band. So it's just the form factor that is different, but it's still an activity tracker because it tracks your activity. However, this kind of simple bands, they tend to be very basic. Like, for example, the Mi Band doesn't even have a screen, so you can't even see what's the time, or you can't even see how many steps you've done. You have to look at your phone and look at it from there. There are also bands that have screens. It's not just all without screen. So like the Garmin Vivo Fit, it has a screen, but it's very simple. It tells you the time. It just tells you how many steps you've done and whether you've reached your goal, and basically that's about it. This is very basic, so you cannot expect it to give you all the notifications that you would expect in the smartwatch. Now, just like for example, the Fitbit Surge, you also do get notifications, but in the form of a vibration. It does not show your messages. It does not tell you who's calling. It just lets you know that you have something coming. Because activity trackers, they tend to have not so fancy screens compared to the smartwatches. The battery life is much better. It can go from 1 week to 2 weeks. So far, the best I've had was I've tested was 2 weeks of battery life on a full charge, using it every single day. So now the million-dollar question, which is better? Well, I feel there isn't any better in this case because it all depends on what you want and what you need. Like a smartwatch, it looks good. It has that luxurious designer look when it comes to watches. In fact, when you wear it, some people might just think you're just wearing a normal watch. If you're a type who wants lots of notifications, lots of things you can do, then you probably would go for a smartwatch. Since it also tracks your activity, I'm not saying that it doesn't, but maybe on a slightly lesser scale and lesser accuracy compared with activity tracker. Why is that so? Because activity trackers are built and made and designed for activity. So you can't expect the smartwatch to do exactly the same thing as something which is specialized. Yep, so that's what I think about the smartwatch versus the activity tracker. It's not so much of a versus, but yeah. What do you think? Which do you prefer? Do you prefer a smartwatch or an activity tracker? Or do you wish someone would come up with something in between which is perfect for both? So let me know. Till then, ta-da!